Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another podcast in the Digital Transformation Whisperer series. Today, we've got Dan Aldridge with us, and the thing we're going to discuss today is about software support ends. What's next? And as we've seen in the marketplace, there's a number of vendors that are actually looking at and stopping support for their software and giving customers options to go to their new advanced software. And so we'll talk about that today with Dan. Dan's been around probably at the time when a lot of these ERPs like me were being started and established in the marketplace. And today, with the software vendors are saying, well, no more. We can't support this anymore. We want to change. So, is that what you're seeing, Dan? What's the sort of things that that customers are probably going to be faced by this happening to them?
Yes, I'm seeing that everywhere. I came from Baan back in the '90s, so Baan, BAAN, the sort of the Dutch SAP, if you will. Back in the '90s, it was number two in the market, and they had a version called Baan 4, which was implemented pretty widely in manufacturing. Like I said, number two in the market at that time. They had a version 5. Then Infor came along and bought them, and then they built the what's now called the Infor Cloud Suite, but along the way it was called Infor LN. That was on premise all the way up through Infor LN latest versions, basically. And then Infor has said Baan 4 is end of life now. So those people that are still on Baan 4, and there are quite a few, there are more than you would think, that didn't actually make the switch to versions of LN along the way to the cloud suite. Of course, so now they pretty much put that in end of life and said that, we have data migration routines, we have an Infor operating service to help you to put data in a data lake house, they call it, so you can have all of that, and you can migrate your versions. And you can do it in a way where you can take it up without customizations and then build the customizations later on using the development tools that are within the cloud system.
Yeah.
Or you can basically do the customizations in the older style tools. I call them tools, and then take the whole shooting match up. So,
And you raise an interesting point there, Dan, in the sense that on premise, and it's one of those things. I think that's probably that turning point, or those sort of things that are out there. I know a lot of the SAP ECC people have started on premise. There's been a push to go to cloud, or hosting some of their stuff on the cloud, and a similar type thing seems to be happening with the Baan stuff. Great Plains is another one where there's a lot of people been on premise, a lot of customizations, and all of a sudden now Microsoft is saying, well, we'll give you Business Central for 3 years, and here you go, work your way through it and build it out as you go, sort of thing. And so that, I suppose, that they're frustrated with people not moving, but we can understand why they're not moving. And I suppose that's one of the things that's probably helpful to have a bit of a chat about is, why do you think people are holding back on actually moving to these new platforms? Is it cost?
right.
Is it just functionality? What do you think?
Yeah, well, it's actually a number of things. One is the cost, and that's both the cost of the implementation and the cost of switching to a SaaS model, a subscription model, right? Because that's a hefty chunk. It's per user per month, is generally the way it's sold, and you have an on-premise software where you pay perpetual, and you're paying maintenance maybe 20% or whatever the case may be. And you switch over to this SaaS model, and all of a sudden you're really paying more, at least initially,
Yes.
until it catches up. It catches up sometime down the road. But, that initial investment is a bit scary. But I think probably the biggest thing is the accumulation of customizations and old versions, different old versions that you have, right? And then the business processes that you want to implement to make your system a system that can differentiate you, or set it up so that you can compete against your competitors. So you have differentiators there, and a lot of times And there's a variety of reasons for customizations, right?
Yeah.
We're starting way back. The ERP systems didn't have a lot of the functionality they really needed
That's right.
for a customer to run their business. So it didn't have kind of that last mile functionality that they talk about today. And so you would build sessions or programs to fill those gaps. So you had
Yeah.
gaps in the standard process, in the
Yeah.
standard product. The second thing would be you wanted to automate some processes the best you can, and there weren't any tools in those days to automate, like
Yeah.
workflows that you could build, right? So what you would do is you'd customize
Yeah.
to get that automation,
Mm.
right? So I've seen ones where they'd strung a bunch of sessions together, right? So you'd say, print the outbound advice, print the picking list, do
Yeah.
all of these things, and they put in initially people would customize to automate those and say
Yes.
do all of those things and then generate the shipment at the end, right?
Yes.
So automate those steps. Then they
Mm.
put in a session to allow you to set up order types. I'm talking about LN now,
Yeah.
which replaced Bond 4. They put in a little tick box to say automatic or not. So easy, right? So easy. But you had to build a customization and maybe even bring in a partner who knew how to do this to pay a lot of money for something that's just a simple little order type thing where you just tick the box, right?
And you raise a great point, because people have built these customizations over time. And like you say, they've built them on their own, essentially their own system. They've got a license, they've got a system, it's theirs. And when they look at it, that model was, we just paid maintenance for the system to the software vendor to be able to
Yep.
support it, but we owned it. Whereas today's model is saying, and what you're talking about there is subscription model. All of a sudden we go from a capex, so we've actually capitalized that purchase of those licenses, to actually go, well, now we're actually going to have opex. And so all of a sudden that comes out of our operating. And so that's a whole different world for many organizations to say, well, all of a sudden that's hitting our operating. But we start to see that, because before it's in the background, it's being capitalized. It was almost like a loan and we just work it down.
That's a very good point, right? So your
Yeah.
CFO, this is an interest of the CFO, who's
Mm.
generally in charge of the CIO, and the CIO is making the choice of the, or at least part of the choice to choose the next ERP that you're going to have, right? But the CFO is the one that writes the checks or sends the wire or whatever method of payment you use. See, we
That's
say
right. And
write the
so,
check, but they don't
yeah.
say that in Europe, right? Or in Australia, I think it's like send the transfer.
That's right.
But
But it's interesting though how it's changed that dynamic, in the sense that, once we bought that ERP, we could put it in the background. It operated, whether it operated well or not. Well, we build a customization to make it work better, and do those sort of things. Whereas now we've got this whole psyche has changed, in the sense that we're going to see
yep,
OPEX. And then we're going to have this every 6 months, possibly. We're going to have a new update come out. So what does that mean to our business? Are we going to have it where we've got to train people on different features and functions that the software vendor thinks that we need? They're solving the problems that they think we have. And all of a sudden we've got this constant evolving dynamic that's happening, and people are going, but I don't want that. I'm happy to stay where I am.
see, that's public cloud versus private cloud, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of the debate between them. If you're multi-tenant, you come up with everybody else, which has its advantages, right? You don't have to
Mm.
have somebody, an IT guy that's a developer, maybe developer skills, going through all the list of customizations and upgrading those and putting in patches and stuff as they become available, right? That stuff all gets done automatically. Great.
Mm. That's
But
right.
how does that affect, what else you got? I mean, does something else break in the meantime, right? That's one thing.
Yeah.
And then also, how do my customizations play as it moves up? It moves up automatically in a multi-tenant situation, right?
That's right.
But how do my customizations that I built in, either through old school tools, SAP would be ABAP or whatever they call it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And or BTP or something like that, a new style tool, whether
Yeah.
it's low code, no code, or high code, or simply just customizations that were developed in the old school tools.
Yeah.
how is that going to play with the upgrade, right? So
Mm.
that's a fear, but it's also something that impedes it. It causes people to pause because the customizations become such a big deal, and
Yeah.
that's frankly why they didn't go up to even different versions of ECC, right? So that, let's say they're stuck on ECC 5
Yep.
or Bond 5 or
Yep.
LN 10.2 or
Yeah.
something like that, right? It's they're stuck there because of largely because of customizations,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It may
And it's
be also the OpEx issue that you talked about and a cash flow and we don't want to be upgrading to the next version every 6 months because that was a nightmare to begin with. So, well, let's wait 3 or 4 years and then do a major version upgrade, right?
yeah, that's right. That's right. And
But
and
but
and it's
that's the
interesting.
old world, though,
It
right? That's
is.
the old on-premise world. It's
Mm.
not the new world. The new world is it goes,
Well,
it
but it's
goes up
interesting
whether
though.
you want it
In
or
it's
not.
it's interesting watching some of the implementations happen, and an implementation can be anything from 12 months, 18 months. In large scale, it might be two years, sort of thing. And if we're putting out new features and new functions in these upgrades every 6 months, so it makes it very difficult to actually get to that point where you say, well, hang on, while I'm actually doing this implementation program, I'm actually going to have 3 to 4 upgrades come through into my system as well. So a lot of people start to get this thing of how do I get on top of this? Because all of a sudden you're telling me that I'm going to get new versions. I'm going to have to keep changing. You're trying to get a baseline for us to actually even get into this this wheel that keeps moving on.
Right,
For me, it must be that people are so confused about what they got to do. That's just like, well, I'll wait because I'd soon. And the software vendors are getting frustrated and saying, well, you can't wait any longer because we need you to change, because it's costing us
right,
money. And essentially they make more money out of subscription anyway. So if you look
right,
at
right. So
yeah,
that's the
yeah,
impetus behind them putting a
yeah,
deadline on there, right?
yeah,
So in the case of SAP, the end of life or the time that it's changing. I won't say end of life yet
no.
because that could be a bit of a soft deadline, right? Because they're gonna find they can't upgrade that many people that fast.
And they've already moved
So
it once because they've realised that, haven't they? It went from 2025 to
right,
2027, and so they already have
2027
had to
now.
move it. Yeah,
Yeah. So they have to make that consideration. And one of the big considerations they're going to be making, well, there's several things that in the interim while they're waiting, if they choose to wait,
yeah,
okay, that the number of innovations that they could have had with an S4 HANA, let's say, like they call it Green Ledger, right? The carbon
mm,
accounting piece that is pretty nifty, by the way. The let's see, what other kinds of Joule, right? The SAP Joule, the
yeah.
AI capability. You can't do that on-premise system,
No.
right? So that's something that's in S4 HANA. So you got to weigh that. I mean, how far behind do I want to get before I start going?
Well,
Before I start the
and
implementation
that is an
process.
interesting point because we hear a lot about AI, we hear a lot about machine learning, and it's been interesting over the world. I've done a fair bit of study into this and working with clients that want to adopt it. And what you find is that clients that have been on, been able to have an on-premise situation, and you find that over time their processes erode or blur to whatever different people have had over time, and so you get this moving amount of different processes that people do, and so we see it, and then they augment that with say soft spreadsheets and those sorts of things. And so when we actually get to the point of saying, well, I'm going to put in AI, all of a sudden I have to really go back to basics to actually say, how do we get a consistent process so AI can actually do what it does? Because what it's doing, it's saying with AI, it's looking at all of the possibilities and calculating a best option as such. So if I have millions and millions of different ways of doing things, what I'm asking AI to do is very, very difficult to actually achieve. Whereas if I've got some level of consistency where I've only got a few different ways, AI becomes really valuable, and then machine learning kicks in there, and so the software vendors keep going, oh, AI is the best of all, and it is, but it is under certain circumstances. And so some of these things where we're looking at these great new technologies, could we, if we put it in, could we actually take advantage of it if we haven't gone back to those basics? And I think the bit that the software vendors are moving is going, we can put you in the new world, but unfortunately, you're driving an old, in American standards, an old 1956 F100, and that is, and that's pretty old world. It's got a carby, it's got all those sorts of things. And so, can we make that leap? Is it possible to do that?
Yeah. Well, the other thing about AI, and maybe even more important about AI, is about the automation piece, is the data piece.
Yes.
The data piece. Now, ERP data is about the most notorious storehouse of dirty, nasty data that you can imagine, right? Uh, it's just really super bad, and that kind of dovetails with, and you see things like, I want to feed it with New York Times to have it learn correctly with my large language models or whatever.
Yep.
I have to have good data, right? So then you have things that are really part of an implementation as you move from an old system to a new system. Master data management is a huge piece of it, and
It is.
data cleansing, which
Yes.
AI can actually help with, by the way. It can help with data cleansing, but you want a data set that is in your system of record. It has to be the system of truth, right?
Yes.
The basis of truth, right? When you see a customer record, that is correct customer record. There aren't five with different names that have bad data on
That's
them, right? So this process of
right.
cleaning up data or master data management is a huge piece of not only feeding AI, which is down the road, just having a good implementation and bringing up a squeaky clean data set for your, business partners, items, bills, routings, all of those things need to be squeaky clean, or you start feeding the new system so you're getting it to go faster to produce more crap. You know what I mean? It's just a faster way
That's right.
of
That's right.
working on old data that is actually counterproductive, is what I'm trying to say, right?
So Dan, one of those things you mentioned was data, and so that the whole concept of data sets, moving them, making them functional, is a challenge, isn't it? So what do you see with that? It's dirty data. What is it?
Yeah, I mean, dirty data is a big problem, and what the tools like a master data management type tool is really useful in cleaning that up. And then what I've seen that works really well is because you always, I mean, typically have a bunch of different systems, maybe even different ERP systems
Hmm.
that are feeding into one sort of central corporate location that has maybe even another ERP system. And what you want to do is you want to have there's various names for it: data warehouse, data lakehouse, whichever term is appropriate for the ERP vendor. So you want to have that data store cleaned up and put into that lake house that really is, and then you want to have the supplemental systems, the ERP system, CRM, CPQ, whatever the system is, feeding into that data lake house where you can do your analytics and your reporting.
You're dead right there. And one of the big issues that I see when we've tried this in with clients is the fact that there's multiple different ways their data is structured. There's dirty data. There's different names that they call things. There's all different sorts of things. And then we say we're going to bring it all together. We'll put it in this wonderful thing called a data lake, or like you say, there's many names to it. And so we want to be able to. Why do we want to do that? We want to be able to get information out of it. So not only do we want to put information in from our transactions and have a financial record and that sort of thing, we also want to be able to get reporting about how well we're doing, how many times a customer buys. What are some of those influences that guide the business in what steps it should make. And so that's the dream we're sold. But the problem, the one conundrum that most people suffer is the fact that unless I've got that data actually in a way that actually it can actually pull all that together and we can actually do some analysis on it, it makes it very difficult. And so the value of these new systems is challenged because we haven't taken it back to the basics and said, well, whatever data set we put in, and if we start a new ERP, we're starting from that new data set. So how then do we delve back into what we've had over all of these other years and try and get some sense there? So it's almost like history's beginning from the day we start our new system, as against this belief
Yeah.
that, well, 20 years I've been capturing information, why can't I use it?
Well, that's actually one of the useful aspects of having a data lakehouse type approach, as opposed to bringing all the data into your system of record, right? Because
Yeah.
if you have, let's take purchase orders, for example, purchase order history. It's good to evaluate your vendors and make some forecasts about how much of these material you're going to get from this vendor, or supplier ratings, or something like that, predictive kinds of analytics. You can do that by putting all your PO history data into that data lakehouse and migrate it to your PO balances. But nothing comes into the ERP. Nothing,
Yep. Yep. That makes
right?
sense.
You start from that point. It has a lot of good aspects to it. One is you don't junk up your system of record with bad data, and it's going to be some bad data in the last 3 or 4 years that you need of PO history, right? But the second thing is speed,
Yes.
performance of your system, right? You want the system to run clean, have a clean core. Um, and so you do it that way. And a third thing that's a really interesting thing that kind of dovetails into the whole discussion about customizations is that often many of the customizations were reports,
Yes.
right? I know in Bond 4, I mean, I did a huge implementation of LN at a big company that I won't name, but it's a large company, very large, like 24 billion in revenue. They had a Bond 5 system, actually, and they had customized so many. I mean, they had hundreds, if not thousands, of customizations. So we made a list. So we had to make a list, and we found that I think it's on the order of 40% of those customizations were reports. And they were not just reports, they were different versions of the same report,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
So you'd have print your balance sheet by month, for sorted by chart of account, or whatever the case may be, right? There were tons and tons of these reports. And what I said is, there's a couple things. Is you can get the general ledger history, just the detail that you need into the analytics
Yep.
platform, right? Just take it up there and just go through all the list of reports. Probably half of those reports are ones that nobody uses anymore,
That's
right?
right.
So you could probably reprogram or redo, and a user can do this, right, with a good analytics platform. They call it Burst Analytics now
Yeah.
at Infor. Armed with a tool like that, they can do those things very quickly. So the half that still remains that people are actually using, and you can measure who's using it, right? You can actually put the process tracking on the
Yes.
sessions and see who's using what.
Mm.
So you just eliminated half of the customizations, right? Then you proceed to, okay, these are things that we did because we're a certain type of business. We're a component manufacturer,
Yeah.
and we need this functionality with put away or serialization or something that didn't exist at that time.
Yeah.
So we have that class, and
Yeah.
then you do basically a business process check. That's why we always start with what we call the engage process, right?
Yeah.
So there's several things coming out of the engage. There's a project plan, of course. There's a change management, organizational change management plan, very, very important,
Yes.
as you know. um, and a project plan for the project, and a thing about business processes. So we dive down into the business process flows, and unlike in the past where they were very siloed, you say somebody enters a PO and that's where purchasing stops. No, it's purchasing, receiving, entering an invoice, paying the invoice,
It's end to
matching and
end, isn't
approving.
it? It's taking that end to
Procure to
end.
pay, right? Procure
Yeah,
to pay, sales order to cash, contract to cash. You that are all basically standard business process flows. In Infor, we use they're called process catalogs.
yes,
So they're
yeah,
based on the industry,
yeah,
vertical industry. They're based on then processes within those, and you kind of drill down till you get to the actual sessions that are
yeah.
underneath. And I think that's part of SAP, what they call
Yes, yeah,
the
yeah,
Rise program, right? That has standard business processes that are in S4 HANA, and they try to encourage. I don't know. I don't want to
yes,
say for, but encourage customers that are ECC that have built their own custom stuff for the last 10 to 15 years. Try to encourage them to sort of pigeonhole into those standard processes that are
yeah.
already in S/4HANA.
Yeah.
Makes sense, right? Because you don't have to redo too much of that stuff.
Well, it does. But imagine, we talked about it, and the whole title of this is software support ends. What's next? And the what's
Yes.
next, as we've just talked about, is actually quite large in the sense that all of a sudden I'm saying to an organization, how you worked that last 15, 20 years, and we made it all special for you because we put some customizations in there, and
Yep.
and we had some reports there. So you just get this thing that just came to your desk, and you had a report or an email to you, or it was a batch that ran every night. Life was easy, life was simple. And all of a sudden now I'm saying what next means that you need to organizationally change the way people do everything in your business. You're
Right.
going to have to go, instead of being set and forget and sit that server room over there, and you've got a team over there that just keeps it ticking along and make sure the thing's plugged in.
Yep.
You've also got now cloud. You've got tools that sit in the cloud that allow you to do analysis. You've got processes. You've got end-to-end stuff. So I actually need Joe and Fred and Tim to work together instead of just having Tim do his bit, Fred does his bit, and Joe does his bit. And all of a sudden, finance fixes it up because we do accruals at the end of the month. We do month close. You know, and that's that world of, and that's the what's next. And you can see why people are going, this seems quite complicated. I know you're saying it's great, Mr. Software Vendor, but for me, like, that means I need a whole different world I need IT to be a bit more solid. I need to
Yep.
actually be a bit more digital literate in understanding, what is this? Before I had a report that came to me. Now you're asking me to get an analyst in to actually create that report. I don't even know what he's going to create. What's the parameters he's going to use? Because I don't understand that. And so these are many of those things of that what's next that I'm sure that is daunting for
Yeah.
people.
Yeah. Well, it also has the promise of a lot of automation that makes your job easier as
It
well,
does.
right? The
It
flip
does.
side,
Yeah.
that's the flip side.
Mm.
And also the flip side is and the prospect and the promise of like an RPA, for example,
Yep.
is to take a process of um, purchase order, procure to pay,
Yep.
right? So you've got entering a purchase order, okay? You've got receiving that in the warehouse, different
Yep.
group, different department, formerly siloed
Yep.
department, right? Purchasing now has visibility. Is that thing received? Now
Yeah.
finance comes along and says, I want to enter an invoice, but I've got RPA to enter the invoice for me through optical character recognition. I get this OCR. You scan
Yep.
it and it picks up the fields like the purchase invoice number, the PO number, all of those things, and it enters the invoice. So instead of the AP clerk spending all day long entering invoices and matching them, because
Yep.
it might be able to go ahead, and it can actually, if you set the parameters properly, if you say, oh, okay, the tolerance on the quantities being different is X percent and the amounts is X percent, And if it's inside of that tolerance limit, go ahead and match and approve it.
Yeah, yeah,
So
and
out
you
pops
do.
only approved invoices except for exceptions. So
I'm
you
glad you
get
raised
into
that
an
because yeah,
yeah,
yeah, and then you get this ability to be able to say, well, let's deal with only the exceptions, and potentially I have less people needing to do that because I should have less exceptions. But to get less exceptions, I need processes to be done. I can't have free text purchase orders being put in the system. I actually want to have them against an item with a price, with a all those sort of things. So my three-way match can actually happen at the end of the day,
yep,
and so it does feed it back to that process again. I need process consistency. I need people to follow the process, not go, oh, it's last minute, it's 5 o'clock on a Friday, and I'm going to actually put in a free text one because I need some information. I just
right.
going to buy something, and all of a sudden that's the exception, and we don't want too many of those, do we? To actually get value out of things like RPA, things like that
Yep.
automation that we are promised.
And you also have the analytics built into that. So you have, for example, you have an accounts payable supervisor dashboard
Yep.
that might have your aging analysis right there, might have your top 10 suppliers
Yep.
in a bar chart. It might have and it would have the ability to drill down on those and see what are the invoices that make up that amount and the exceptions. So you set up alerts. Alerts say, boom, send me an email or send me something on my dashboard that says these are out of tolerance. So you're actually working from your one homepage,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And you're having all this RPAs going on behind the scenes to make it so that you transition your role from the grunt stuff to the good stuff. And that's analyzing your suppliers and looking at your ratings for your suppliers. And is this a good supplier? Is this a bad supplier? What's their on-time delivery? What's all that stuff can be delivered into your homepage, for example. So
and
you set
and
up little
and
widgets on your homepage for it.
and you're right. And what it does, it actually gives you that ability to continuously improve, which was quite difficult before. The whole exercise of in the past of continuous improvement was, do a lot of analysis, a lot of detail on what was going wrong. Whereas now all of a sudden, it's like you say, it's on your dashboard. It's saying, well,
Yeah.
hang on, we've got this pocket of customers or invoices or POs or whatever that are causing us these issues. And so, how do we then shrink that? How do we change that? And so that information is live and available. And I think that is the upside that many organizations fail to understand, is that having an upside like that and actually working in that way where you work on eliminating the exceptions, not managing the quantum, everything that's there.
They used to say management by exception. That used to be the thing. Michael Porter, I think it
Yeah,
was.
yeah,
These guys, right? And they're right. You don't want to be sitting there doing the grunt, order entry stuff. You want to be looking at something that pops out of the process that's automated
mm,
that says, hey, there's a problem here. This is
yeah,
something I
yeah,
need to address.
yeah,
It's like that on the shop floor. If you think about it, so the ERP in a way is an extension of your manufacturing. I'm in manufacturing, so I always bring up these kinds of examples. It's an extension of your shop floor in a
yeah,
way, right? And it's measuring things. And you might have a manufacturing execution system, an MES,
yeah,
that's hooked to your ERP that's saying, okay, well, this is what I estimated in terms of time and material and labor hours and machine
yeah,
hours. And this is what comes back from the machines through the MES. And how am I doing in terms of efficiency? How am I? Because if I can sell more, it's like that. You ever heard of the book called The Goal?
yes, yep,
By
yeah,
Eliyahu
mm,
Goldratt. I
yeah,
probably pronounced that wrong, but his idea was you want throughput and you want to address constraints, which would be your bottlenecks on
yes,
your shop floor. It's the same with a system. It's the
it
same with an
is,
ERP system.
yeah,
You don't want a bunch of POs and receipts piling up here waiting to be processed because the weakest link or whatever is the AP clerk that can't get to the mountain
that's
of
right,
things. And it's the same on the shop floor, right? It's
yeah,
that bottleneck machine
mm,
that if you keep it running 24 hours and it doesn't go down because you have predictive maintenance on it, then your throughput can increase, which means your sales can increase.
and
So it's
and
not
and
about predicting. Yeah,
therein
go ahead.
lies that opportunity, doesn't it? In that sense that, and I'm not sure whether many organisations in their business case actually realise that sort of opportunity. And
Yep.
so that opportunity is that we get operational savings. So I can sell more for a more cost effective price or an optimal cost of production and those sorts of things. And when we start looking at business case ROI, we're just looking at, can we recover the cost of what we paid for the implementation? Whereas what we should be looking at is, how much
Yes.
are we going to get as operational efficiencies, which is
Right.
ongoing. It's evergreen, isn't it? It's one of those things that doesn't go away if we keep up with it.
Right. So go back to, let's start again, the implementation, right? The
Yeah.
opportunity. Let's call it an opportunity.
Yeah.
Okay. It's by and large going from a system that old, like an ECC 5 or so,
Yeah.
on up to an S4 HANA is a re-implementation. No
It
matter
is.
what they tell you, it
Yeah.
is. And it is of any software. I'm not picking on SAP.
Yeah.
Just, you know, um, that's a re-implementation. So
Yeah.
I see that as an opportunity.
Yes.
Okay, and the opportunity is when you're going through the engage process, when you're building out the statement of work, you're building out the data migration plan, the customization list, and the plan for customizations. All these things, you also want to line up your KPIs. You want to decide from a business point of view now, not 10, 15 years ago when you first got this system.
Yeah.
You had different business objectives. You were
Mm.
probably many times as small as you are today. So
Yeah.
you've experienced serious growth. The market has changed completely,
Radically.
right? So you've got a set of KPIs now. You're the manager, you're the executive leadership team, you're evaluating a new ERP software, or you're thinking about upgrading.
Yeah.
What do? You know the business objectives,
Yes.
right? So those KPIs, you want to make sure that they're set up in your system of record to measure those. And you
Yes.
want it to be one system of truth. Now, the one system of truth is probably your data lakehouse, not your ERP system,
Yes. That's
right?
right.
Because there can be multiple ERP systems. There
Yes.
can be a CRM system. There can be various systems feeding this lakehouse. So that becomes the system of truth,
Mm.
right? Or
Yeah.
the what do they call it? Yeah, the
I
record
know what you're
the
talking.
record
Yeah.
of truth. Yeah, you know what I'm
Record of
saying.
truth. That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
And then you want to align what it's measuring to your business KPIs. Your business KPIs, not IT KPIs,
Yeah.
not headcount reductions,
Yes.
right? That's not a KPI. Headcount reduction is a cost saving that might come about because of an ERP, a new ERP,
Mm.
maybe.
Yeah.
But in the past, that was almost the sole justification for an ERP system. And I would argue that now that should be almost completely discounted.
Yeah.
Because what you want to do is you want to migrate your people, if they're good
Yes.
people. If they're not good people, they'll leave anyway.
Yeah.
But you want to migrate them to doing value added things in the new world. And you want to align them with the KPIs that you want to measure for your business. You make that system of, the analytics to support whatever BI, whatever data warehouse you use, you make it support those business objectives,
Yeah.
those KPIs. So those are constantly being measured. So what you do then is you're measuring them, you have a target,
Yeah.
right? Not headcount reduction, a target like reduce our inventory by 15%,
That's
right?
right. Yeah.
Measurable things. That's your balance sheet. You reduced your balance sheet.
Mm. Well, it's interesting you say that, because often in what we do in helping clients get to that point, we talk about benefits realization, and many of them go back and say, well, I just want a return on investment for my business case, and we look at it like you're talking there, in the sense of saying, well, benefits realization is about how you're actually improving what your position is where you are, not the fact of how many less people you actually might have doing it, but it's that thing of saying how more efficient can you be in the way you operate. The dollar that you have for that cost of production, is there any opportunity to be more efficient in the way you spend that dollar, so you're not spending as much of that dollar, and some of that falls through to the bottom line. And so that's what we call it. And it's interesting because many people struggle to even understand that concept. Whereas I came back from the early days of TQM and all that sort of thing, where we
Yep.
actually were looking at improving our processes, improving those things to get
Lean, things like
optimal
that.
efficiency. And
Yep.
then technology came in, and that was going to solve it all. But I don't think it solves it. It gives us the ability to measure it. And so if we've got good processes and we measure them, we can continually improve them, or we can deal the things that are emerging that we don't see very quickly, and so we can deal with those quickly. And I think that's an important thing for the new world of what software can offer. But we as an organisation are probably the model. That's only 20. Software is the 20% part. The 80% is how we use it and how we set it up and what we do with it. And that's what I think organisations, if they embrace that, then the what next becomes a really, really good opportunity, as you say. It's one of those things about thinking of it properly, and don't have the software person come in and say it's going to be easy, because
Yep.
reinventing your business isn't always easy, is it?
Yeah, and that's where the organizational change management comes
Yeah,
in,
yeah,
right? That's why it's so important. The
yeah,
people aspects of this
yeah.
change.
And having
It's
people
it's gut
involved in
wrenching.
that,
It's
isn't it?
gut wrenching for people, you
It
know?
is. It is. But having him involved in it and understanding the why, many times people then become involved in getting to that end. Whereas when we come in and we've got a team over here in the side in a separate building,
Mhm.
building this system for us, and all of a sudden on go live we're going to give it to you and hand it over, and people get it and go, what were you thinking? Because you don't even know our business. You've got a whole lot of consultants that came in and they made it all up for you, and you didn't even, and I think that's the holy grail of change management, is
Yep.
having people involved along the way. There is a knife's edge to that, in the sense that people who are involved in it from the business always want to go back to the way they did things. And so there's this fine line of saying, how do I get you engaged to improve, as against how do I get you to engage to create what we had before, which we don't want to do. So so that's the
Yeah,
change
that's
management problem, isn't it?
yeah. I mean, you can incorporate the change management as a checkpoint when you do your conference room pilots,
Yeah,
right? We usually recommend on anything of any size, 8 months to greater,
yeah,
that you have 3 conference room pilots.
yeah.
This is the 80% processes. I mean, everything goes 80/20, right? At
Yeah,
the end of the day, I think it goes 80/10/10. But
yeah,
you go through conference room pilots, and
yeah,
those are end to end in nature, right? So
yes,
they follow the flows of the end to end business flows
mm,
that you're evaluating, even in
yeah,
the beginning, right? Because you get everybody in the room. Because, for example, uh, finance might be complaining they can't pay an invoice because they didn't get the packing slip
yeah,
entered by the warehouse people,
yeah,
right? Because they don't know what impact this has on the AP. They're always crying about they don't get their packing slip. Well, hopefully you scan it in and you have the
mm.
the RPA
And
doing
yeah,
it. But let's just
it's
say they're still like manually scanning it in.
yeah,
They have to remember to do that as they receive it, that they scan in the invoice. And so they have a paper copy, so they don't have to say, hey, Bob, you didn't put in the copy of the purchase invoice with the shipment, whatever, right? It comes with the shipment. But that's a way of getting everybody talking and getting
yes,
everybody communicating and getting everybody, frankly, to walk through the system, force them to walk through the system, force them to put their hands on the keys. It's not a PowerPoint presentation exercise.
no, no,
It's process and order all the way through,
yeah,
right? And that gets people on board. It sorts out the people that are weak, that
yes,
need practice.
yes,
It sorts out attitude
yeah,
issues, which they're people, right? They don't like change.
that's
So
right, that's right.
there's attitude people. Attitude problems, I think, are just the outcome of somebody who's frightened.
Yes, Yeah, no, I
right? They're
agree. I
frightened
agree. Yeah,
about what's coming. So you make them comfortable about what's coming,
yeah, yeah.
right? And so that CRP process also demonstrates to management that they know how to do it. They know
Yes,
how to do it with their hands on the keys.
that's right.
Very
Not
important.
this thing
Very
that.
important. The training is like that too, right?
Yeah,
You get work instructions and you have them sit there. Consultants should sit there and not do anything.
yeah.
Consultants should just look at the screen and say, "Oh, okay, all right." You think you're doing it okay? Okay, fine. Oh, I don't know what to put in here, and or whatever.
But it's
But
also, I think it's part of that coaching them and making them feel comfortable, because some people freeze at the thought of doing something new, and so
yep,
but what you're talking about here, and I think we've come to we've gone full circle in the sense of the what's next.
yep,
I think that we're very clear on the fact that we know that we need to re-engineer our business as such, in the thing
yep,
of embrace this new technology, get people to work differently, so the change piece, build data that actually is consistent and it's usable in the new world. We have that catch net where, like you say, if we have the data lake, and some systems, some solutions don't offer that. They have
right,
in-house reporting platforms that don't actually have that level of data lake that you have there. And I think I've seen systems that do have it, and it really is appealing to me to think that it's my catch net as such. And if I've got some good tools in that data lake, I can actually start to make sense of old data as well as the new data that's coming through
yeah,
from my core system of truth. And
right,
so all of a sudden the upside becomes really, really, really good. But at the moment, software ending and saying you need to go out to a new one is not necessarily that appealing to people, because it's that thing of, geez, it's going to be cost. All of a sudden now I've got this ongoing cost. I see it every year. It's going to come out. Subscription's going to come out. I've got
yep,
a lot of change happening. Am I up for that? And I think for the leaders of businesses, the CFOs, the CIOs, the CEOs, it's about saying, well, for our business, we need to think a bit more long term about how we actually take this next challenge and this next opportunity and really drive. And it's funny. I saw an article this week where they talked about three-digit returns, operational returns. So in the hundreds of percents, not the 10%, because 10% is just a skim off the top as such. Really, it's you can
right,
tweak anything and get 10%. But if you're actually starting to see, if you do this well, where you're getting 200 to 300% benefit that actually flows through to the organization, the way it operates and what it does, that's pretty compelling. But there's got to be a number of people that actually achieve that. And I think if we do all of those ingredients, as you say, well, we do change, we do data, we re-engineer our processes, and we get everybody involved in that, then all of a sudden we've got a great opportunity, haven't we? And that's really
yep.
what this presents for people. It's not so scary if we take it that way.
Yeah,
and this is the
well,
problem, isn't it?
there's pluses and minuses, right? You got to weigh with multi-cloud environment. It's all on the
Mm,
cloud. It can
yeah,
be linked together with technology.
yeah,
Or,
yeah.
or down here, you're upgrading all of these, you know, Great Plains to SAP S4HANA, or all of these other ERP systems. Imagine how much that costs,
And this is the
right?
balance, isn't it?
Right?
It's
As
saying,
opposed
well,
to some more
yeah,
licenses up here and some
yeah, yeah,
connection activity and some integration. I
yeah.
think it's a hell of a lot cheaper than migrating everything over to one ERP package, I would
And
say.
that's what organizations have to really sort of think their way through in doing this.
Right.
And I suppose for me, the one thing that I see in that is I couldn't ask any one provider who has a bias towards any one platform to give me an answer that's going to be suitable for me, because unless I weigh up some of those things and I actually give you that view to say, well, there's this, there's that, there's that. Now let's look at how that impacts long term. Let's look at the cost impact of that. Let's look at how your business impacts to that. And then all of a sudden I start to go, well, I can make a decision for me as an organization that's suitable. Whereas if I do ask someone who is, you need to go this way, and whether I ask Vandenberg, they'll say you go this way. If I ask Infor, they say you go this way. If I ask SAP, you do this way. And then all of a sudden I get to the end of that and they go, yeah, but there's more to do. And so the cost keeps going, sort of thing. So it is
Yep.
one of those things that we find being and as being independent to it.
Yep.
We are able to push that thing of saying, well, you really need to think about it for you as the organization, and you'll come up with the best. I'm not saying anyone's worse or better, but as the organization, what's best for your organization? And so it may
Yep.
be that you're highly dynamic and things are changing, and it makes sense to have not things set in stone as long as you want. So, apps you can take advantage of, you can have them, blow them away as they become redundant. Makes sense
Yep.
for that model. But if you've got one where you're a very stable, flat business and it's consistently as you work, you're just looking at improving how you do what you do, then maybe another option is better. And so it is one of those things for organizations to step back and go, well, who do I ask? How do I get that information? And
Yep.
and probably for software vendors to help people. And I know it's hard when you know at the end you've got a sale, because that's how you get paid. It's how do you get organizations to that point where they feel comfortable with where they are, because it's really a mucky world if they don't get to that point.
Yeah. Well, always you got to be skeptical about ERP software vendors, of
Yeah,
course, right? And you got to be almost equally skeptical of system integrators.
yeah, yeah.
I mean, not to pick on Deloitte, or I'll just pick one, Big Four, big Y Pro, or what are they called, Wipro?
Accenture or
Um,
any of those.
they're
Yeah,
going to tell you. They're going to tell you what they do.
yep,
They're going to tell you at some level. They're going to tell you, okay, you're 5 billion plus revenue. You've got SAP or Oracle.
yeah.
Choose one, because that's what we consult in.
That's
That's
right.
not the answer necessarily. Not necessarily the right answer.
Because we know that's the
But
price band
I
that you
think
can afford.
I mean, it's a bit tongue in cheek, right? Because
It is.
I think we both consider ourselves digital transformation people, right? That
Yeah,
are more wide. We have a wider scope of interest and of advice that we can give companies
yeah,
than just what ERP software to select. I mean, that's what Eric, when he left his first company,
yeah,
that's what he was thinking. I mean, this ERP software selection is, I don't like this business. It's basically a war over vendors. Who wants to pay you the most, or whatever the
mm,
case may be, right? I mean, it's all kind of it's driven a bit. I mean, you can look at Gartner, for instance. I put Gartner stuff out there. People like Gartner stuff. It's good. It's thorough. But is it completely 100% unbiased? I think not.
no, that's right.
At some level, but I like it personally. But I guess what I'm driving at is I want to look at, and I'm sort of rededicating myself this year, and a lot of the activity that I've done in LinkedIn recently has been much more broad. So I've been talking about SAP, and I've been talking about Info Cloud Suites, because that's what we sell.
Yeah,
I've been talking about digital transformation. I wrote that now it's 5 keys to digital transformation,
yeah,
because 10 was too much. So I split it in half. So I'll come out with another 5 digital keys to digital transformation success, because I'm tired of talking about failure, frankly.
yeah,
There's
yeah,
enough about failure. I mean, Eric covers that failure really, really well. He's got all the failures down. I think that we need to start talking about success, and that means success across vendors.
yeah,
It needs to be across vendors. It needs to be, the discussion needs to be about the business,
yeah,
and about expansion plans, and about acquisition targets, and about private equity, and
yeah,
about all of these considerations. That what do you want to do with that company? You want to acquire that company. You want to have, what's the good fit? I mean, you're an automotive parts manufacturer. Well, you might want an automotive solution,
yeah. That's
for
right.
instance,
That's
right?
right.
You might not want a one size fits all solution. You know what I mean? So
Yeah,
I
that's
think you got
right.
the
That's
dog
right.
barking there.
Yeah, I
The
have
dog
a.
barking.
And we've got to get to the point of wrapping it up too, because I think
Okay.
we're finishing on a great point, in the sense that I think that as a whole industry, and digital transformation is an industry as such, as these days, it's software's included in it, change is included in it, all of those things are there. And I think that you've touched on the best point of all, in the sense that how do we as an industry get organizations to be better at working within their own industries, leveraging digital transformation, and giving them those benefits that I think will propel productivity. It will propel the ability to be able to increase profits and all those sort of things that are all cliches, but they are available if you approach it right. And if we take the self interest away and put more of the organizational interest in our advice we provide, then all of a sudden that's going to happen, isn't it? And that's what I see what your articles are doing, and what I'm trying to do with these sort of podcasts, because failure is one thing. It's just a scary word. It's like war. It's like any of those. But how do we get success about what we do, I think, is a really, really great topic. And I thank you for raising that, because to me, that's the whole aim, that I do what I do. I'd retire otherwise. So thank you, Dan, for that. And we need to close because we've sort of talked long enough. And so I really appreciate the discussions we've had today. I think they're very insightful. And not only have I learned a lot, I'm sure that our listeners will learn a lot out of this as well.
I hope so.
All right. Great, Dan. Thank you very much. Speak to you next time.
All right. Thanks, Wayne. Bye-bye. Well, you've got there's an echo.
Why is that?